Hi, folks. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Sohel Selki, and I'm making a video game. Recently, I had to do a major rework of this project, and we moved from like a phase one type of prototype to a phase two, which is what you're seeing right now. I didn't have like much video stuff from before that point, which is kind of tragic because a lot of work was done that did have to get dismantled. So I'm starting to see the value of doing a devlog. I thought now would be a great time to do it because, I mean, I have enough to show and we got some exciting features coming down the pipeline. So I originally made this video. It was quite long. Just going into way too much stuff. I guess it just, I had way too much stuff to talk about with the intent and the design and the implementation and everything going on. I know that's just, people don't want to see that. So we're just going to jump right into it. What you're seeing right now, this is the earlier prototype that had to get dismantled. It's got more visual stuff going on, but there's not a lot going on under the hood. I had basically this was a proof of concept that these sort of physics simulations could be done on a spherical space. The code was terrible. We're just creating things and attaching them manually. The logic, some of it has been moved out of just this one class, but it's not centralized in any sort of way in how it works. Everything is just kind of like little independent arms. So in order to create something more comprehensive, I basically had to restructure everything from the ground up. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So this is the rework. The most obvious thing, of course, is the HUD elements. Initially, I had tried to use the last prototype and attach the HUD elements to it, but it wasn't going to work because I mean, I could have gotten it working, but it would have been more brain splat code, and there was quite a bit of logic that had to go into it. And so, without making a bigger mess, I basically had to just start over. And here we are. So we're going to go into the HUD really quick so you know what you're looking at. So starting at the top left, we have debug information. Um, the player's not going to see any of this stuff. This is more for me as I'm implementing features and tracking different metrics. The most important one, though, is weight. That one probably will be available on the HUD at some point. And because everything is a physics simulation, as you pick up ammo, scrap, fuel, the different components that you choose for your ship, that weight is going to impact how the ship responds to forces, thrust, collisions. And it is a number that will change as you're playing, so it's important to keep track of it. Next, we got energy. This is pretty straightforward, I think. I mean, anything, well, I guess not. To put it succinctly, energy powers all of the little components on your ship. Different components have different amounts of energy consumption based on what you're doing with them. If it's an energy weapon, then firing it uses energy. If it's a component like, let's say, your radar system, then when it becomes active, it uses more energy or less energy. You want to keep this high. Once it goes into like low power mode, uh, you're going to lose some control over your ship. At the bottom left, you see a little green bar. That is your health bar. I don't really have, like it's fully implemented, but I don't have damage set up yet, so there's no way to move it. So moving on, we got engine heat. Engine heat is an interesting little function that I built into the engines. I think it's interesting anyways. As the engine heats up, basically they increase their function. If it's a combustion engine, it consumes more fuel. That is, it turns fuel into energy and thrust at a faster rate. I plan to implement an ionic engine that simply just outputs more thrust while consuming the same amount of energy, making it a very energy efficient variation of the combustion engine. But yeah, every engine has its own response to heat, so they have like different characteristics and personality. Next up is propellant. I'm kind of on the fence about this one right now. I might wind up taking this out. Basically, you have like a propellant tank, and your ship converts fuel and energy into propellant so that you can power your thrusters. It's basically what you use for steering. Um, yeah, right now we're just giving it a try. It's an idea. I think it's an interesting idea. But the HUD has already got like so much stuff. I don't know how much I want people thinking about whether or not they can turn. Lastly, we got fuel. This is about what you'd expect. This is inspired really from my time working with aircraft in the Marine Corps. The fuel had weight. We were a heavy lift aircraft, and the fuel had weight to it. We had to calculate our expenditure of fuel in like pounds per minute, because it was so critical to how we conducted our mission as a heavy lift helicopter. And I thought that was a really cool thing. What I don't like about this mechanic is, it just kind of puts a timer. It's just like a timer, like you have this much time to do stuff, and that's not really what I wanted it to be about. I wanted it to be more like it's something that you might have to manage based on your kit, and hopefully I can implement it in such a way that that's what it feels like it's rewarding when you manage it well, or costly when you don't. And there are alternatives to using fuel, but it's going to require some thought and implementation on the player's side. There's going to be drawbacks to that as a strategy as well. So now that we got all that out of the way, let's jump back into this and start talking about cool things that I implemented using this framework. So the first thing you're going to notice as we jump back into playback is that the engine starts priming here. Check this out. So that little tuft coming out is a function built into the engines, combustion engines specifically, where you can consume a larger amount of fuel in order to get your heat up to where you want it to be more responsive. If you're coming down from like not having used your engines for a little while, if you need to get back up to heat, you can. So yeah, on top of also using resources, the other part of this big restructure was making everything more modular, and you can see that here. This is a larger engine. If you see the weight, it's much higher than it was before, the ship's weight. It's producing a lot more thrust, but it is heavier. It's also consuming a lot more fuel to make it faster. Not only can you select what engine you have equipped, but you can select how many of them you have equipped. This is an example of someone using two small engines. You can see that the weight has gone up, not as much as with one large one, but you're still getting a lot of thrust. I think as the specific engines have more characteristics to them, there would be a meaningful reason for choosing two small engines. So I've got it set up right now. You can have as many as 3 engines on a ship. Having a third engine increases the weight more, and its fuel consumption gets kind of high. And you can see it here, the thruster system isn't really adjusting as much to the increase in weight, so it becomes kind of difficult to manage. What I'm thinking is that as you upgrade, you'll have to add engines, which will increase your fuel consumption, but your fuel capacity is tied to your ship. You can add fuel tanks, but then like your cargo capacity goes down. So the thinking right now is basically like as you upgrade your ship, it gets heavier. You'll need to add engines, but you'll be kind of capped on cargo space or fuel, depending on which route you go, and have to upgrade accordingly. Real quick, I just want to go back to this priming function to point out something that you can see really clearly in this little clip. The engines heat up independently. The smaller engine doesn't keep heat quite as well, and they respond differently to the priming function. But if you look closely here at the fuel bar, you can see it just getting chunked away. I think it's a pretty interesting mechanic. I think it adds a bit of depth to the game. I'm kind of excited to see what comes from it. I don't think I'm going to keep it as a bar though. I think I'd prefer it like if there was other kinds of feedback to the player, like the particle system coming off of it, the pitch of the sound, maybe rumble, and then you could just intuit what the engine heats were without needing another thing on the HUD. I'm including this as just a demonstration. This is so ridiculous. I have 3 of the very large engines. I mean, like the engines themselves, I think are combined, they're almost 10 times the weight of the ship. So, but you can see me large and in charge, just kind of smacking stuff out of the way as I'm colliding with it. Produces a ton of thrust, but kind of the concept pushed to its extreme. So I had to build a new thruster system to deal with this heavier kind of ship, and this is where the real benefit of the big restructuring that I did shines. I was able to put this second thruster system together in like minutes. It really wasn't a big deal at all. So there's some other stuff I want to draw your attention to in this clip. Notice how much propellant is getting used. Notice how much energy it's taking to keep this up. My engines are not very hot, but then like once I start consuming fuel again, it powers it up. But this thruster system is just using so much fuel that I run out. And so once I'm out of propellant and fuel, I mean, I can't do anything else. So the next thing I wanted to see was what happens if I put a heavy thruster on a very light ship. This was the first ship that we looked at with just the one small engine. You can see sometimes I'm just trying to adjust my heading or something, and I wind up doing a pirouette or I start strafing, and it's it's difficult to control. But I have to level with you. I did this. I made it so that the heavy thruster system has a minimum amount of propellant that it can release. The thinking was that since thrusters are so important to maneuverability, strafing, the burst maneuver dash effect that isn't quite implemented yet, why wouldn't someone just take the biggest thruster that they can get? I don't think that this limitation is, I don't think it increases build variety though. I think it actually limits it because you're pretty much just going to take whatever thruster is appropriate for your weight. So I need to rethink that. Not sure what I'm going to do yet. I think that where it's at right now is honestly not far from where it needs to get. You can see that it's just really chewing through my energy and my fuel. So maybe just having a higher energy tax would kind of make this like you can take a heavier thruster if you want, but you're going to need fuel tanks and an energy generator to support it. So speaking of energy generators, that was one of the other components I was able to implement rather quickly just because I had done a lot of the legwork beforehand in making these modular components. Energy generator just turns fuel into energy at a constant rate. That's what it looks like. This system has no engine. It is just the heavy thruster. This is the lightest setup that we've had seen with the heaviest thruster, and it doesn't need an engine. At first, I was like, "Oh, this is totally breaking the game," but then I thought, like, no, this is this is actually totally viable. This is a good thing. The conversion of fuel to propellant to thrust is pretty significantly less efficient than fuel to thrust with a main engine. If fuel isn't your main concern, though, if fuel usage, then this is a totally viable kit. You can keep a very light ship and just use your thrusters. The drawback is that you're going to have to support it with an energy generator and probably some fuel tanks. You may even want like propellant tanks. But the benefit is that you have much lower heat signature, which is something that's like only partially implemented. The idea is that every component on your ship will generate a small amount of heat as it's on or active, especially engines and generators. And at some point, if you decide to just have super huge propellant tanks and no generator at all, you could just be completely stealthed and off the radar. I think that about covers everything that I wanted to go over for this little devlog for the work that I've done. Moving forward, I'm just going to be busy for a while setting up components. There's still components I haven't even gotten into. Like I did make one module with the energy generator, but tanks, things like that that increase capacity. Also need to do shields. That was one thing that I had prototyped in the previous version of this project that was like super cool on it, honestly. So like getting that to actually interact with like energy, that would be great. And of course, weapons, targeting, mapping, maybe like cargo space. Once I set up all of that, I can really call this phase of the prototype done. I still got a lot of work to do. If you got any thoughts or comments on anything that I showed you, I would love to hear it. I really haven't gotten too much feedback. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So, yeah, let me know what you think. I'm totally open to it. I do have some pretty rigid things about like how I want it to be, but you know, as I'm going through this, I'm really starting to, I don't know, I guess be more flexible about some of my expectations, and that's totally okay. So go ahead, let me know. Yeah, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it.